Do you remember the day that you found out your child had type 1 diabetes?
Yes.
How many remember the date? I mean, do you really remember the moment it sunk in? I remember that day vividly. A few weeks before Christmas, 3 years ago, Gabriel started having frequent urination. And I thought it was, I do a lot of home remedy stuff, I thought it was a bladder infection. So I started getting little home remedies. Of course, we always take them off sugar. I've done natural stuff for years, alternatives. And it got better. So I thought, oh, that worked. You know, like most of my home remedies, that worked. But then a week after Christmas, it started again. Well, I cut the sugar off. And then we kind of relaxed probably because he didn't have the bladder infection, I thought. So here I'm a nurse in the past. And one day we were on our family walk. It started again, but it wasn't that bad. And we were on our family walk. We usually took a 3-mile family walk. And we got 2 houses down, and Gabriel sat on the sidewalk and said, I can't go any further. And I was like, what? What do you mean? You know, he's usually the head of the pack. We can't keep up with him. What's wrong? And he said, I just can't. I can't. So I said, that's it. We're calling the doctor. I give up. Maybe we'll have to go on antibiotics. I hate the thought because I'm so natural in treatment. But I said, that's it. You know, we got to go. So I went and thinking, I didn't even ask Dan to go because, you know, I probably have to get an antibiotic, which, you know, I'll just go and get it over with. So I went to the office. I remember taking the urine sample, and the doctor pulling me into the room, and he said, because I know our previous family doctor really well, he said, Sally, he doesn't have a bladder infection. And I remember thinking, that's funny. And he said, but he has sugar and ketones in his urine. All of a sudden, this thing in my mind started going off. Wait a minute. And he said, I want to take just a blood sugar stick. So we went in the room, he took it, and he looked at me and he said, how long has it been since he's eaten? And I said, oh, it's been over 3 hours. And he stood up and hugged me. And he said, Sally, sorry to tell you this, but it looks like, I'm pretty sure Gabriel has type 1. Looks like he would be a type 1 diabetic. I want you to go. And again, he kept hugging me. And I kept thinking, I like you a lot, but why are you hugging me? This is not why I came in. I came in for an antibiotic, not to hear this. And so from that moment on, literally, I can see frame by frame, slow motion, what happened. He was explaining lab work, take it now. He's putting papers, telling people to get paperwork. I was like this. Gabriel was sitting there, and I was trying not to cry because I was so overwhelmed. And I thought, I just have to hold it together so Gabriel doesn't see me crying. So I was going like that, walking out the office, hearing kind of what he said, and the door opened from the doctor's office. I just wanted to get out of the office. And as soon as that door opened, it was like a hurricane hit me. I felt like I was going to fall over. I started bawling, and I told Gabe, please just go over there and stand by the tree and that. And I was just bawling, and I was fumbling for the phone trying to dial the number for Dan. And he answered. He was in his office, and he answered right away, and he said, yeah, how'd it go? And I said, Dan, the doctor said he thinks Gabriel has type 1 diabetes. And I heard him say, what? And I said, then there was a pause, and I heard him crying. And I said, Dan, I don't know if I can drive home. I'm shaking so badly. So we prayed on the phone together, and I did get the grace to drive home. And that is the account of what launched me into a trial of shock and grief. Our lives changed drastically that afternoon. It was January 10th, 2008, and I will remember that date in my mind. At first I had a hard time sleeping at night, thinking about all that was going on with Gabriel. When I finally got to sleep, I woke up suddenly thinking, why did I wake up? Then I'd remember, oh yeah, Gabriel has diabetes. And I have to wait to get back to sleep again. Sometimes my heart would literally ache thinking about it. I realized one day that I was in the process of grieving. I was mourning the loss of a normal, healthy life for my son. I honestly wished it was me instead of him. Even though I had worked as a registered nurse in the past, I was scared to manage my own child's insulin regime. It just seemed so scary to me. I can't imagine what parents experience that don't have medical knowledge. After explanation for my grieving, another explanation for my grieving was that I comprehended that my son's pancreas was in the final stages of failing. I felt desperate to find some hope for Gabriel's sentence of future pain and suffering. It seemed like mission impossible. Authorities said there was no hope. Maybe 10 years down the line there was something. When we talked to the specialist, I spent every possible hour searching for promising alternatives. I struggled with relaxing or doing anything because I felt guilty that I could be spending time researching, finding something to help. I would spend late nights on the internet until I couldn't keep my eyes open. I made calls. I researched all my known journals that I got, made calls to all these doctors everything I could possibly think. I called radio shows. Nearly all options were a far distant possibility, and they seemed risky, like islet cell transplants, pancreatic transplants. I'm like, I'm not willing to risk his life if it, failed. I'm not willing to do that. I'll go on insulin, but there's got to be something, a better way. After reviewing the data, there seemed to be one glimmer of hope. I actually had flow charts. And the one thing that just one little spark showed, I got the Sam Beiser's report, and he had a whole thing on type 1 diabetes. And I looked at that, and on the bottom it says, there's a new book out, and if you have anyone with type 1, you should read it. And it was The pH Miracle for Diabetes. So I got it, and I read it, and I thought, there's just a little spark was there instead of the gloom. Still had, not a lot of optimism, but just a little spark. We called, a long story, we went and visited Dr. Young. I came home, we started the lifestyle, and Gabriel's blood sugars pretty much within a few weeks stabilized. The twist in the story was when 4 months later, we had all of our kids screened because they said now there's a chance more of the other ones. So we had all of our kids screened, and Nathan showed some definite markers, and we were like, oh, so we got his full testing done. And the day we found out that Nathan, 4 months later, had type 1, we found out that even though Gabriel's blood sugars were normal, he had no insulin left in his body. He had lost it all during that time even. So we were really disappointed, thinking, oh, this isn't going to work to, bring his insulin levels back or to renew the pancreas. We were disappointed, but then we're like, he has normal blood sugars. So I'm a nurse, and I have a lot of friends that are doctors and nurses, and I tell them, they're like, well, that's impossible. You can't have normal blood sugars and no insulin. So we just thought, okay, if this is how we have to live, because I know the more you can have a normal blood sugar, the less you're going to have damage to the organs. So I thought, if this is what we have to do, that's what I'll do it if I want to have a healthy child to grow up well. And so we started Nathan on the same program. Later tested revealed Gabriel's pancreas. When we finally found a doctor that we could track well, did a really intense testing, that Gabriel's pancreas started producing several months later insulin. Then the next checkup was several months later was more. And it kept going up until he hit a normal level, and that was almost 2 years ago. For 2 years he's had normal pancreatic levels and after response to after food, because we test both. It's more really extensive than the endocrinologist might do. So Nathan went from underproducing to overproducing. So we're like, well, that's weird, but he had insulin antibodies still in his blood eating up the insulin. So his healthy body said, well, if you're going to eat it all up, I'll show you, and I'll make more, which is more kind of like a type 2. They overproduce. They overproduce to compensate till they kind of fizzle out. So that was interesting, that we actually saw Nathan do this flip where Gabe went straight to normal levels. Nathan did this flip over to overproducing. Then we watched him slowly come down, and he's just about almost perfectly where Gabe is. The amazing results started getting the word out, and we started getting calls and emails from all over the world, literally. I learned something new from each person I talked to. It's kind of like putting pieces of puzzle together, because each child's different, but you start seeing this common thread of things happening with all these children, but yet there's different twists. And also we realize that each person is different due to a variety of factors. The calls and emails started basically, it's like, it's the same kind of questions all the time. So I try to be on, I only had a short time because we homeschool and I just did it all free for all those years, but I could never give them the whole picture because I said, I always wish I had just 8 hours with somebody, that I could just sit down and really explain it, you know. And so, again, I just could give bits and pieces. So our hope for this workshop is that it will encourage you and equip you to treat your battle with diabetes in the healthiest way possible. And you realize that you're not alone in this challenge and adventure, that you'll gain understanding from our daily struggles, and that this will inspire you to persevere with your goals in sight. This work will give you a glimpse into our journey.